One of the words we hear in the Bible a lot or in church is the word redeem. Well, what does the word redeem actually mean? That's one of the things we're going to be talking about today on this week's lesson. Hello, welcome to this week's lesson. I'm Brian Vermeer. We're continuing our series in the book of Ruth, finishing it up actually today. Next week, we're going to begin a series on the book of Romans. I'm real excited to be getting to that. A lot of good stuff in that book. But today we're finishing up the book of Ruth. Ruth is a bright spot during the time of the Judges. It's a good story about good people. And during the time of the Judges, we hear a lot about bad things that people did. It's nice to hear a refreshing, good story. And some people may wonder, why is the book of Ruth even in the Bible? This story just seems so insignificant compared to everything else that's going around. What does this have to do with the overall story of the Bible? Well, by the time we get to the end of this, you're going to see why the book of Ruth is in the Bible. So let's pick up where we left off. Ruth was a woman from Moab who married the son of a woman named Naomi, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Naomi and her husband Elimelech had gone to Moab because there was a famine in the land of Judah. And while they were there, Naomi's two sons got married. Elimelech died, and the two sons died. So we're left with Naomi and her two daughters-in-law in the land of Moab. Naomi decides to go back to Judah. One daughter-in-law stays in Moab. The other one, Ruth, goes back to Judah with Naomi, showing her loyalty to her mother-in-law, even though she really has no ties to her anymore. When they get back to Bethlehem, they're both widows. There's no work for them. Naomi is even too old to get married again. Ruth goes out to the fields to glean, that is, to pick up the leftovers from the harvest. It turns out the field that she goes to belongs to a man named Boaz, who is a relative of Elimelech, although she does not know this at the time. Boaz sees Ruth. Apparently he is immediately attracted to her, thinks she is very beautiful. And he goes, finds out who she is, realizes that she's also a, relative by marriage, even though her husband is widowed now. And he decides to let her glean in his field the whole time. He says, don't go to anyone else's field. Stay with my servant women. I've told my men to leave you alone. And he just takes care of her because he's heard of how nice she has been to her mother-in-law, to Naomi. Well, Ruth goes back to Naomi and says, this man Boaz has been very nice to me. And Naomi says, Boaz, he's a relative of ours. By law, he is supposed to be the one to marry you. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes here. So she tells Ruth, at night, go to where Boaz is sleeping. He's probably sleeping out in the field. Since it's harvest time, he's protecting his harvest. Go out to the field where he is sleeping. Lay down at his feet and pull the blanket off of his feet. The cold air will probably wake him up. Some people try to put a sexual spin on that, but I don't think there's anything sexual in the phrase to uncover his feet. Some try to say, well, uncover his feet is actually a euphemism for something else that she's uncovering. But no, I don't believe there was any premarital sex involved here or anything like that. I don't think there was anything indiscreet here. This was a sign that a woman would do if she wanted to marry a man. This is simply a way of making her intentions known. I would like to marry you. She knows that Boaz is attracted to her. And she knows that, she needs a husband to take care of her. So This is just something that women would do back then. So let's take a look now in Ruth chapter 3, verses 8 through 10, to see what happens when she does this to Boaz. It says, at midnight Boaz was startled, turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. So he asked, "Who are you?" "I am Ruth, your servant," she replied. "Take me under your wing, for you are a family redeemer." Then he said, "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than before, because you have not pursued younger men, whether rich or poor." So at midnight, Boaz, his feet have been uncovered. Something startles him a little bit, probably the uncovering of the feet, the cold air hitting them. He wakes up, and he immediately sees there's a woman laying down at his feet. It's dark. He doesn't recognize her. So he says, "Who are you?" And she tells him who she is. She says, "I'm Ruth. I'm the woman who's been gleaning in your field that you said you would take care of, that you wanted to make sure I got plenty of food." She says, "Take me under your wing. Take care of me. I want to marry you. I want you to be the one to take care of me for the rest of my life. And you should do it because you are the family redeemer." Well, what is the family redeemer? In the law of Moses, it was stated that if a man died without having any children, his closest relative, usually his brother, would take the woman, the widow, as his wife. And then the first child that would be born to them would be considered the child of the dead man. That way the dead man would not die without any offspring. So legally the first child would belong to the dead man. There's even an account in the book of Genesis, and so this actually goes way back before the law. There's an account in the book of Genesis where one man did not do this. He deliberately would not have children with the woman, and God killed him for it. But in this case, she says, "You're the family redeemer, so it's your duty to marry me." Now, I don't think Boaz needed a whole lot of convincing. He was already attracted to her. He already liked her. Now he's seeing that she likes him as well. She is attracted to him as well. He says, "May the Lord bless you because you're showing more kindness to me now than you did before, because you haven't gone after younger men." Now, we don't know how old Boaz was, but apparently he was an older man, or at least above the age at which Ruth would have been considered a suitable wife. We don't know if he was a widower. We don't know how old he was, but apparently he considered himself to be an older man and probably not even that attractive. He didn't see why Ruth would be attracted to him. But he says, "You haven't pursued any younger men, whether they were richer or poorer than me." In other words, you didn't go after any other men just because they were richer than I was, and you didn't go after any poorer men than me just because they were better looking, I guess, So he's saying, "You're being very nice to me by wanting to marry me. You know I like you. I'm proud to hear you say that you like me as well." So it says he lays his blanket over her. Again, I don't think there's anything sexual here. He's giving her his bed. He's getting up. He's giving her his bed. Says, "You stay here tonight. In the morning, go back to your home. And I'm going to see what I can do about this." So let's take a look now at verses 11 to 13 and see what Boaz tells her. He says, "Now don't be afraid, my daughter. I will do for you whatever you say, since all the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Yes, it is true that I am a family redeemer, but there is a redeemer closer than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, that's good. Let him redeem you. But if he doesn't want to redeem you, as the Lord lives, I will. Now lie down until morning." Let's first talk about this word redeem. What does it mean to redeem something? We hear that a lot. We hear about how Jesus redeemed us. And we see a foreshadowing of this, you might say, in the idea of the family redeemer. To redeem something means to buy back something, to pay a price for something that is legally yours to begin with. In other words, you had something, it was taken away from you, and now, even though it is rightfully yours, you are having to pay a price to get it back. When my older sister was a teenager, she gave her senior ring to her boyfriend. Well, her boyfriend claimed he lost the ring. A couple days later, we get a call from a pawn shop saying that he has this class ring in here, and it had her name on it. He called the school, told them, what year was on the ring and the name that was inscribed in it, and they said, oh yeah, we know who that is. And the school gave the pawn shop owner my dad's phone number. So the pawn shop owner calls my dad and says, I've got her class ring here in my pawn shop. Apparently the boyfriend had hocked it. Dad had to go down and buy the ring back for my sister. In other words, the ring was rightfully hers. She gave it to her boyfriend as an act of love. But then the boyfriend sold it, and Dad had to go redeem the ring. He had to go pay a price to get back what rightfully belonged to my sister to begin with. God redeemed us. Jesus' death redeemed us. See, we belong to God to start with. God is our creator. God is the rightful owner of us. But since we choose to disobey God, we leave God and follow Satan. And that's really just the easiest way to put it. You're either following God or you're following Satan. There is no in between. If you're not following God, you're following Satan by default. So even though we are rightfully God's property, we get away from God. We leave God. But in order to take us back, God has to pay a price for us. And that's what Jesus' death did for us. Jesus' death was paying the price so that God could buy us back, so that we could belong to Him again. That's what to redeem something means. In this case, the family redeemer was someone who bought back the woman. He would marry the woman. That would be the price he paid, would be marriage, to the woman. So Boaz tells Ruth, he says, first of all, stay here tonight. Don't try to go home in the dark. It's dangerous. So just stay here tonight. They're out in the field. All the other men are sleeping out there as well. He says, just stay here tonight. And in the morning, go home. And yes, I am a family redeemer. But the law says it has to be the closest relative. And I'm only the second closest. Whether he had an older brother, whether there was another cousin maybe who was closer, we don't know. But there was a man who was actually a closer relative to Elimelech than Boaz was. So that man actually had the first right to redeem Ruth. So Boaz says, I'm going to go talk to him in the morning. And if he wants to redeem you, if he wants to marry you, then fine. He can do that. That's his right. But if he won't, then I will. So Boaz is fulfilling his duty. He's doing what God is asking him to do. Ruth goes home. She tells Naomi what Boaz said. Naomi says, okay, that's great. Trust me, he's not going to rest until he gets this thing straightened out. Boaz goes to the city gate. Well, he goes and finds the closer relative first and takes him to the city gate, because the city gate is where all the elders of the city would meet and sit. So, city of Bethlehem, all the elders of Bethlehem are gathered around the city gate all day, discussing politics, discussing things going on in the city. This is where meetings would go. So Boaz takes the relative there. And he says, there's a man who wants to sell a plot of land. And you are the closest redeemer, because the redeemer didn't just go for the wives, it also went for land. If you wanted to sell a piece of land, you had to give first opportunity to buy it to your relatives so that it would stay in your family. He says, and you're the first relative, so you get first dibs on it. And the other man says, okay, fine, I'll buy it. I'll take it. I could use some more land. And then Boaz says, but along with this piece of land also goes the woman Ruth. If you buy the land, you also have to marry her. And then the man says, nope, I can't do that. So Boaz tells all the elders, he says he even took off his shoe as a sign of, the contract being made. You've heard all this. He's given up his right to marry the woman Ruth, so I'm going to marry her. Boaz is fulfilling his obligation. But he's not doing it just because he has to. He's doing it because he wants to. And fulfilling our obligations to God is not something we should do because we have to. It should be something we do because we want to. Doing our duty to God. Doing the things that we know God wants us to do. Doing good should not be an obligation. It should be something we choose to do because we know it will please God. And we should not look at good deeds as something that we're obligated to do, as something that we do because we have to. Because you can't earn your way to heaven. Don't think that by your doing good things, that's what's going to get you to heaven. Too many people in the world today think, oh yeah, I'm going to heaven because I've been a good person. And they seem to think that as long as their good deeds outweigh their bad deeds, then, that'll be enough to get them in. Well, the bad news is, one bad deed outweighs every good deed you've ever done. Even if you put them all together. See, God demands that we be perfect. God demands that we be sinless in order to get into heaven. And again, that's why Jesus had to die. Jesus had to pay that penalty for us. Jesus had to redeem us. Because we can't be good enough. Now, does that mean we shouldn't try to do good deeds? No. We should do good deeds because Jesus has saved us and because we want to show our thanks to God for that. We want to please God. Boaz is marrying Ruth here, not just because he has to, but because he wants to. It makes him happy, and it should make us happy to please God. So let's finish up now by looking at verses 13 through 17 of chapter 4, and we'll see why the book of Ruth is in the Bible. It says, Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. He slept with her, and the Lord granted conception to her, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name become well known in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. Indeed, your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Naomi took the child, placed him on her lap, and became a mother to him. The neighbor women said, A son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So Boaz marries Ruth and immediately fulfills the obligation by having a child with her. It says the Lord granted conception to her. Ruth has been married before to Naomi's son Chilion, but apparently they didn't have any children. And whether this was just because they weren't married long enough and it just didn't happen, it kind of sounds like here that God did not allow her to have any children until now. See, God has a plan. And we don't always understand God's plan, but he's got one. And he knew that Ruth's child should not be with Chilion, but instead with Boaz. So he didn't allow her to have any children until now. The women said to Naomi, what women? Well, when a child was born, there were women everywhere. Women, a midwife would come in to deliver the child, and the other women of the village would be there to witness the birth. This is just something that would happen back then. These pictures we have of, Mary and Joseph giving birth to Jesus out, in the stable all by themselves. Completely wrong. Mary and Joseph gave birth to Jesus in a house, probably surrounded by family members, and all the women would have been down there with her while she was giving birth. The women said to Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, blessed be the Lord. They're not praising Boaz and Ruth for the child. They're praising God for the child. They recognized children as a gift from God. If you have a child, that child is a gift. I look at my daughter as a gift from God. And my daughter is a gift from God. And the only reason I have her is because God allowed me to have her. And it's been a wonderful experience being her father. They said, blessed be the Lord who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name, that is the name of this child, become well known in Israel. And it will become well known. Although we don't know of anything he did himself, it becomes well known because of his descendants. It says, he will renew your life. Again, they're talking to Naomi. This child will renew your life. Remember when Naomi returned to Bethlehem from Moab, she said, don't call me Naomi. Naomi means pleasant. She said, call me Mara, which means bitter. She felt God was out to get her because her husband died and her sons died. And she had no idea how she was going to take care of herself. They're saying, this son now, this grandson that you have, is going to be the one to take care of you in your old age. And your daughter-in-law is better to you than 7 sons. Don't be upset because you don't have a son anymore. Your daughter-in-law is better to you than 7 sons would have been. So Naomi takes the child, places the child on her lap, and it says she became a mother to him. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that she took him away from Boaz and Ruth. It just means that that's how she treated the child. She treated this grandchild of hers as if it was her own child. She loved this grandchild as if it was her own child. And the neighbor women said, a son has been born to Naomi. So they're treating it as if this is Naomi's son. Again, kind of following along the family redeemer rules here. Naomi's sons died, so the next son born belongs to her. And they named this boy Obed, which means servant. And Obed becomes famous because Obed grows up, gets married, has a son, and his son is named Jesse. And then Jesse grows up, gets married, has 8 sons, the youngest of whom is named David. And David grows up and becomes the king of Israel. So Ruth's great-grandson becomes the great King David, the founder of the Davidic dynasty, which means Ruth is also a direct ancestor of our Lord Jesus Christ. If you read the genealogy of Jesus in the book of Matthew, there are 4 women that are named. Tamar, who had a son with her father-in-law, deceptively. Rahab, the prostitute, who we talked about in the book of Joshua. Bathsheba, who had a son because of an affair with King David. And Ruth. And of those 4, Ruth is the only one that there's not really anything shady about. This shows that God can use anybody. God has a plan for your life. Don't think that you are a nobody. Don't think that God can't use you. We all have gifts from God that He wants us to use to serve Him. And God can use each one of us. All you have to do is ask Him, what does He want me to do? Next week, we're going to begin a study of the book of Romans. Romans is a book that I believe it was Martin Luther who said if he could only have one book to read for the rest of his life, he wanted it to be the book of Romans. It's the book that explains salvation. So, we're going to do an intense 3-month study on the book of Romans. So, please be here for that. And I'll see you next week.